Appreciate you guys coming out. My name is Jeff. I'm the president of the San Diego Marine Aquarium Society, the organization that's hosting this event. So just want to extend a thank you to you guys. We really appreciate you coming out. And again, I hope you guys are having a good time. Enjoy the rest of the day today. With that said, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Sonia Rowley.
Thank you very much, Jeff. My name is Sonia Rowley. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Gorgonian sea fans in the Twilight Zone today. What you're seeing here, just as an opening slide, is some macro images I'm doing at the moment in aquaria of different feeds on what these azooxanthelate gorgonians actually feed on. So instead of having some snazzy picture, I decided something like this would be quite good. Please excuse me, I only flew in yesterday and I've got a sore throat, so I'm going to croak my way through this. But I really thank you for your attention today. And as you can see, through these observations, one of the things I find really fascinating is that they seem to be reacting to nothing. And as we go through my presentation, I hope that we'll start to develop insights in what these things actually may or may not eat. This one's an Astrogorgia. It was collected at 92 meters. And in Polyp in Micronesia, and the footage, I'm doing some work with Waikiki Aquarium. Okay, so you've heard people talk about the Twilight Zone, and I'm going to steal a little bit of a slide presentation from Richard Pyle, who you saw yesterday. And so just a quick description of what the Twilight Zone is. Most people and most research for many, many years, decades in fact, have occurred within the first 50 meters due to the advent of scuba diving. In fact, rebreathers actually came before scuba diving historically. But this is where we get this dearth of information actually in terms of our coral reef understanding. But actually over 80% of the actual coral reef is below this depth. But if you wanted to go down below 50 meters, typically, you would need something like a sub. And these will cost now, I've not long come back from a trip, it's like $50,000 a day. So if you're going to spend that kind of money, then you're not really going to want to go in this intermediate section. So this intermediate section has now, for the past couple of decades, started to be penetrated in the advent of electronically controlled rebreather technology. And there's lots of different names that you've heard. I tend to call them Twilight Reefs or Twilight Zone. To be scientific about it, we can call it mesophotic coral reef ecosystems. But all I can tell you is when you get down there, it's cold. Now, just actually think, where did Twilight come from? This is a question I hear a lot. And this paper was in 1972 by Stark and Stark, and it's in National Geographic. And at the bottom of their last figure, you see they coined the phrase Twilight Reef. And that's where people like Richard Pyle took that and have been using it ever since. It's a little bit of historical perspective. You can get that off Amazon as well. So Twilight Reefs. Here you can see there's Brian Green catching a fish there. Brian's not here with us this year, but he was here last year, and he's a member of our team. And this was taken at 146 meters off Paquin Atoll in remote area of Federated States of Micronesia. And there's some key parameters that we need to pay attention to. And as aquarists, I'm sure you have long sleepless nights over these things. I do, and I'm not an aquarist, although I'd like to be. Temperature, light, water flow, and the water chemistry, the water quality. And all these things, many, many creatures, as you know, are extremely sensitive to it. So what I wanted to do is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or Hitchhiker's Guide to the Twilight Zone. Now, I'm from England. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it was very popular. Did anybody hear about it over here? Yes. I actually, when I got first asked to do this, which was last year, I was like, right, I'm going to do the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Twilight Zone. And then life passed me by. So you have to bear with me, because we're just going to have a little bit of a snippet into this. I hope this works. And this is what it's like on our descent.
Ah, whoa, what's happening? Who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose in life? What do I mean by who am I? Okay, calm down, get a grip now. Ooh, this is an interesting sensation. What is it? It's a sort of a tingling in my... Well, I suppose I better start finding names for things. Let's call it, tail. Yeah, tail. And hey, what's this roaring sound? Whooshing past what I'm suddenly going to call my head. Wind. Is that a good name? It'll do. Yay, this is really exciting. I'm dizzy with anticipation. Or is it the wind? There's an awful lot of that now, isn't there? And what's this thing coming towards me very fast? So big and flat and round, it needs a big wide-sounding name like ow, ound, round, ground. That's it, ground. I wonder if it'll be friends with me. Hello, ground.
Okay, don't think. Nobody think. No ideas, no theories, no nothing.
Thermocline. That's what it feels like.
It's crazy.
You get down to those depths
and we need an idea.
And you hit a thermocline and you get the biggest brain freeze you could ever possibly imagine. And you're just down there and you're like, oh my God! And that's when you tend to go, that's around 140 meters plus. And on the outer atolls and the remote islands and atolls, it's really poignant. And this to me was of extreme interest. What is its source and how does it affect the creatures? Because I noticed across bathymetry that the Gorgonians changed quite dramatically in terms of their biodiversity, their taxonomy. And I also do a lot of deep sea research, and I was finding a lot of deep sea species coming up shallow. Now, did any of you guys see the Oceanus Explorer this year? Yes, there's a few of you, and it was really, really exciting. And I was really, really excited by I'd see a lot of, when they were pushing up around 250 to 300 meters, I'm one of the shore-based scientists that does a lot of the identification behind the scenes and taps in what I think everything is, and then they say it on the screen. And I was really, really excited because I could see a lot of things that I was beginning to see past this thermocline zone when you're kind of half blinded for about 30 seconds. I'd see lots and lots of those in that deeper footage actually in these depths. And so one of the things that a few of us, you know, people like Matt Wandell and Charles and everybody are pushing towards keeping these kind of animals in aquaria so people can see them. Now, one thing that was said to me recently, I'm kind of going on a little bit, I'll give you something nice to look at, is I get specifically women contact me and say, thank you for showing us what we will never ever get to see. Because, you know, quite often you work really, really hard and you think, oh my God, I'm just banging my head against a brick wall. And then people say that and you go, right, okay, I'm just going to keep moving. This is really good. So I want to try and show you some of the things that maybe some of you will never ever get to see in the real life. Now, Twilight Reefs are actually, most people, due to the media, mainly the media and the academic media, are associating mesophotic coral ecosystems or twilight reefs with these wonderful monospecific stands of Leptoceres and sometimes Montipora. And this is a Leptoceres of Maui in Hawaii, which is at 67 meters, and literally it's extremely impressive. It goes for just a long way, just showing these scleractinian corals. But it's been mine and my colleagues' experience that actually the large dominance of mesophotic coral ecosystems, or the twilight zone, throughout the Indo-Pacific, but also in the Atlantic, the tropical Atlantic, actually consist of Gorgonian corals. You also have soft corals and black corals. So this again, as I'm saying, I'm going to talk to you about today. Now, I'm going to cover a little bit of ground from last year in case people don't know certain things. Now, coral biodiversity, people always think corals, scleractinia, hard corals, zooxanthellae, all the rest of it. I get that same question over and over again. Corals, don't they need light? And actually, what you'll come to realize is that octocorals are much more biodiverse and prevalent and speciose in our global waters than scleractinians, and you'll find the vast majority of that actually below scuba depth. So here you have 64% of corals are octocorals. So what's an octocoral? for those of you who don't know, for those of you that do, well, there you go, repetition is a very good thing. Now, as you can see here, this is the polyp of an octocoral. It has 8 tentacles, where hexacorallina, or the scleractinians, or the Pocillopora, and all the rest of it that you have in your aquariums have 6 tentacles or multiples of 6. So that's the basics, 8 versus 6. And then you have what we call pinnate tentacles. And these pinnate tentacles are peculiar to the octocorals and actually help to increase their surface area for nutrient absorption. Now, they're high global abundance and diversity. You find them everywhere. You find them in the mangroves. You find them in temperate, tropical, Antarctic, and abyssal plains. You literally find them all over the place. They have conservation flagship species, or those charismatic pygmy seahorses, and I found a couple of new species of those yet to be described in the Twilight Zone on certain hosts, and some of them are a bit unusual. And the other thing is, I mean, they can be very morphologically variable, which makes them very difficult to describe, and they're suspension feeders. And the trophic structure, what these animals actually eat, are still up to debate in my eyes, because what I see is that they have a very reduced gut. If you have a reduced gut, how are you going to eat? And also, they have poor nematocysts, so they don't catch things very well. And from my observations, they couldn't really catch a cold half the time. So I want to start exploring that over the course of this presentation. So that's just a little bit of a lowdown. There's many ways to be a Gorgonian. You can be a Gorgonian in all these different shapes and sizes. And you see that one at the end is Brarium. That's often something I know you guys have. And I was in complete denial of Brarium when I first started studying Gorgonians. I was like, oh my God, it's flat, it's ugly, I don't want to know. But I had to revisit that. I love Brarium today. But you can see some of these you can find in the deep seas, lots of different ways to be a sea fan. And there's different polyp structures as well. And these different phenotypic traits, these different morphologies, help me find out what these different species are and how they function and how they eat. Their polyp structure and their branching structure has an influence on how the flow enables food to get to them. So these things are extremely important, and extremely important, obviously, in terms of dealing with how you're going to deal with them in aquaria. Just back there, you see all these little calcite structures. These are called sclerites, and you get tons and tons of them in various shapes and sizes. And this is another method, as well as on top of molecular methods, that helps me identify them. So that's a little bit of the science side of things. Now, when I first came here last year, I wanted to show you how I was going to do various experiments. I wanted to look at 3 different specific axis structures of the Gorgonians, how they're made up in 3 different ways, how their calcium carbonate is made up in different ways, and how that pertains to different seas over geological time. So geological time, you've got high magnesium calcite seas, low magnesium calcite seas, and these have influenced how things have evolved over time, over the millennia. Okay, and so that was why I really wanted to get into aquaria. I wanted to run experiments and see how these things had diverged. And this is what I planned to do. I was going to stick different species of Gorgonians with particular axis types in aquaria. I was going to put them all together and set up these experiments, right? And I was all about this. But I had to learn how these things were actually kept in aquaria. And there's been a lot of lessons in this past year. And those lessons I'd like to share with you. Now, first of all, I've done a fair amount of research in Paquin, Ant, and Ponape. And this is where I've been collecting the stuff that I've brought back to Hawaii to actually start working on in the tanks. This is where it is. It's in Federated States of Micronesia, and here are some of the sites that we've been diving on. And I've also set up experiments in these regions. Here's our main team. That's Dr. Richard Pyle and Brian Green, either side of me, and they are very much veterans in this type of research, and we're also test pilots for Poseidon. So I thought, right, temperature. I know my stuff. I go down there. We know how cold it is. It's pretty consistent. I got the temperature off the rigs. because I hadn't got the temperature loggers down on the reefs at that point because it had been early days. And I thought, right, I'm going to set up some experiments, and I'm going to put different Gorgonians, and I'm going to put them at these different temperatures, and I'm going to see how they survive. These temperatures are distinct. I was completely hell-bent on that. You feel it every time you go down. So here we've got a species called Anella, and which means angel in Hawaii. And I decided to transplant them. So at 90 meters, those are my controls. And then I set up more in 30 meters of water, and then I set them down at 130 meters of water. So these are the replications. Why did I choose Anella? I chose Anella because over the literature and also my observations over many, many years, I found this species, it's actually Anella reticulata, would actually traverse depths that would go down to over 200, sometimes over 300 meters. And that's quite a temperature range. So you've got 5 meters, which could be usually around 30 degrees centigrade, all the way down to say like 10 or 12 degrees centigrade. And as far as I was concerned, it's like, how do you do that? How do you traverse that kind of depth? So that was my test. And I was going to do this over a year. And then I'd taken extra samples, and I was going to run all this genomics techniques and stable isotopes and keep them in the cryo and just see how they were going to go. And it was going to be a perfect world, and I was going to tell you how everything was going to evolve and answer the question to life. And this is how we did it in the field. Some of the first experiments known using this rebreather technology last year. So we're scouting out, that's Dr. Richard Pyle, we're scouting out a particular site in Ponape, and you can see there's lots and lots of Gorgonians. You can see it's a very Gorgonian-dominated reef. And here's me, I'm actually taking coral mucus in particular corals, and here's Brian Green, who's actually tagging the corals that I sampled. And so every single colony that I sampled, I actually did a scale photograph of. And then while we were doing our long decompression, we set up these transplant blocks. And the following day, we would take those transplant blocks down to the depths where I designated them to be. There's Brian Green taking them down, and they're really quite heavy. I did an awful lot again this year. So this is what they look like at 3 different depths. These are the transplants. And hopefully it will make sense shortly on why I'm telling you this. And these are them down at 130 meters. You can see them perpendicular to the actual flow. So there's a natural indigenous or whatever you want to say colony there. So what actually happened? A year later, I came back. And I must say the boys were more depressed than I was. This is what happened in the shallows. There'd been a curious temperature anomaly. And so you can see the Anellas, some of them survived, but they were completely overgrown by algae, this invasive algae that had actually taken over down to 60 meters on the reefs in Ponape. Ponape Island, but not the atolls that were very close by. So we're probably dealing with some degree of eutrophication. But as you can imagine, I was like, oh my God, this took some doing and some technology to put this kind of research together. So it was like, right, okay, so those were the 30-meter ones. They didn't do so well, but there were some survivors. But my controls, they worked out really well, and we'll see a photograph of those very shortly. I mean, this algae just decimated the reefs, between a 25-meter and 60-meter belt. A lot of the corals were destroyed, which is actually quite sad, isn't it? And yes, we are dealing with curious temperature anomalies, and I'll come to that in a minute. So my controls, they did fine. So the method worked. Very happy about that. The method worked, the controls lived. I was very pleased that my science wasn't completely rubbish. But I was still curious on what's happening with the temperature, because I know I've seen these down in the shallows. So I was pretty certain that in the deep they'd be okay, but in the deep, look, nothing, hardly a twig. And I was like, oh my God, these things really respond to temperature. So I looked a little closely into this. Over the year, I put down temperature loggers every 10 meters, from 10 meters all the way down to 150 meters. And here, this is very rough and ready, because that's a tremendous amount of data I've had to put together, and my computer kept freezing up. But here, all these different things here, you have, oh, we've got oh, I can't find the clicker. You have down at the bottom here is 130 meters, and you can see there's quite a temperature variance, but then it just flatlines up here, and this is in March. So what happened is the locals told me that in March, they had some freak tides, and everything just went much below chart datum. Lots of things died, smelt really bad, but the reef temperature went right up. Even at 130 meters, it went up to 28 degrees centigrade, and pretty much flatlined until we got there. And I was like, oh my goodness. But also I wanted to highlight to you, so you can see the flat line there, by the way. So that's what it was until when we got out there. It was really, really hot. And we really, the thermocline that I'm very, very used to seeing down in the deep, I didn't get the ice cream head. And even though that was very nice, I didn't feel pain when I went down there, you notice the difference on the reefs with the animals. But also I wanted to actually show you this diurnal temperature range. And so when I went back to the aquarists in Waikiki Aquarium, because we had got this collaboration going on, and they wanted to know all my environmental data, I did not know how to tell them, well, actually, on a diurnal range, at 90 meters, which is where I chose to collect the specimens to bring them for live material, what do I tell them? How are you going to deal with that as aquarists? How are you going to deal with 1 minute 12 degrees centigrade and then next minute 28 degrees centigrade in one day? And this is what these animals are actually having. And the flow can be equally as diverse. So as a scientist, I was like, I've really got to try and tease this apart. And even though I know that there's lots, I'm just like, right, I need to keep consistent with my water temperature, I need to keep consistent with my water quality and all these things. This threw all that on their head. In nature, that's not what you see. So I wanted to share this with you today because I have as many answers and questions as probably you do. So anyway, while I was there, I thought, well, hell, I'm here. I may as well do something. I'm going to test them for survivorship, because what it seemed to suggest to me is that the ones in the shallows had actually survived until you got the high temperature anomaly and the algae had actually overtaken them. Because before them, because there were still some live colonies. Unlike the deep colonies, where obviously they had been as far as I was concerned, the level of degradation that I saw there, they'd obviously died before that temperature anomaly. They obviously cannot sustain long-term really cold temperature. So I set up this experiment, and I kept it at 90 meters. I know my controls are in. That's where I collected them, that's what I did. I threw a whole bunch more up to 30 meters. I threw another collection, another repetition up to 30 meters. And for the rest of the next final 3 weeks, I let those colonies get completely covered in algae. I just let them just get populated, get them in a terrible state, and then on the last couple of days, I threw them down to 90 meters, and I'm just going to see how they survive. And I've tested lots of different things, see how they make it, see what different parameters. I've got temperature, light, and all those different things measured, and see what those parameters are. But that was just a simple thing, and that's what's coming in the future. But I also did some field aquaria. There we are, bucket science, in a very, very dark room with a micro chiller on it. And I just basically kept that up, and I actually put live rock in there and kept that going, and actually didn't put live material in there until about 3 days before I left. And I've got to tell you, these things, and I'm sure those of you who work on these things, they kick out some ammonia. I was doing up to 3 water changes a day. It was just, it stunk. And I'm tickled pink they're actually surviving today. So in order to pass this message on to the public, this is what Waikiki Aquaria started to set up behind the scenes. They're setting up so I can run my experiments, but we're also testing how the different flow regimes and all the rest of it between the different types of tank structure. So you've got like a regular tank here, I suppose, pseudo-chrysal, and then you have a cylinder here. And this is what it looks like. The lighting isn't usually like this. It's this crazy mad scientist going in with her diving stuff and filming the polyps, so you can see just down there my camera system and all the rest of it. Usually it's very low light. That light is just at the lowest blue level. You don't really get any other light at those types of depth, just that low level of blue. And so we've got the Gorgonians up there, here and here. and with a good flow-through system. And so far, they're doing really, really well. Because last year, it did not go so well, and all our material died. And the brainchild behind this is largely a man called Jonathan Casey. I don't know if he's here today, but he set up this whole system with some assistance, I think, from Charles and Matt. And yeah, so far so good. And so that's where we are with that. But while we were there, last year, obviously my corals that I brought up last year, we weren't able to keep them in the aquarium for very long, for a variety of reasons. Now, what I decided to do is bring up some Carrier Joa, which is an octocoral in Hawaii and is actually a weed. And we thought, right, we can't kill a weed, we'll be all right, we're going to do some trials, we're going to test these different parameters, we're going to test temperature, we're going to test feeds, we're going to find out. Now, myself and a couple of friends of mine, one friend of mine, Dr. Les Watling at Hawaii, we hypothesized that basically they're not really eating the big things, they're actually largely having bacteria. I do a lot of microbiology, and they're largely gardening bacteria and feeding dissolved organic matter and dissolved material and particulates from the water column. So this is what the polyps of Carrier Joa actually look like in the field. They look very nice and healthy and all the rest of it. And after 6 weeks in aquaria, feeding them Artemia and large mysids, this is what the polyps look like. Most of them had died, and this is what remained. And what you can see here is that they've got this gaping hole here, a lot of reduction, and some degree of increased algae, but largely the polyp structure started to change. It really did started to change. And when I looked at this under the microscope, it was clear to me that these animals were starving to death. They were trying to increase themselves in order to increase the food. Yet food was going into the aquaria regularly, large food. And what I noticed from my observations is that this large food, even though it was taken in initially, they were filling their boots with it, if you still keep feeding them after quite a while, 20 to 30 minutes, they start to bring it back. So just in order to some work that I did a couple of years ago, this is just a very brief example to show you that in healthy reefs, the Gorgonians will have an isotopic signature that matches that planktonic and sediment environment. And in impacted reefs where humans are putting their own waste, their actual signature starts to match the human waste. So this goes to show you that they really are eating things that are particulates in the water column. And so at the moment, I also collect the coral and the coral mucus. This is in RNA Protect, already preloaded with the in the syringe. So as soon as I bring that mucus up, it's already snap preserved, and I can actually see what's being expressed. And so what things I'm actually testing are reciprocal metabolic pathways that the bacteria and the actual host will share to work together in order to survive. A typical symbiosis that you would see, but not in the, these are in azooxanthellate corals, not zooxanthellate. Now, one thing that did actually come as a complete surprise to me was the local communities. So, and I had not, and I say from polyp meets policy, is because I go in with my crazy little scientific objectives, and I want to see what the polyps are eating, and I want to find out what the new species are, and I go out to these remote atolls and stuff like that, and they happily accommodate us, and we go around smelling of coconut and fish and all the rest of it, and it's wonderful. But what's happened, and what I also do, we as a team, is we actually give all the local communities all our data, all our footage, all our images. The Sonia rec here, that guy in the blue shirt, he is he's the chief of this Pakean community, this remote atoll, but actually he's a teacher on a nearby island, so he can actually look at the data and look at the footage. We also give it to the conservation societies and all the rest of it. And what actually happened as of this year and next year, they've now asked us as a team to start helping them design their marine protected areas. And that, to me, was worth more than anything. And we're actually meeting with the government next year in order to help them design those areas and to show them where the corals are, where the fish are, and what areas are worth keeping and what areas aren't. Because they're also noticing these temperature anomalies. They're also noticing factory ships coming in and taking their animals. And they've asked us to help. Now that's just, wow, that blew my mind. And I wanted to share that with you. But they're genuinely interested. They provide me with this table and they stick the light on it and we play like count the starfish. And they're really, really interested in what you bring up. Now, so basically to summarize this is the mesophotic coral ecosystem, right? You've got these different zonations. People use it in terms of light and temperature and flow and these different things. But actually, from the data, it's showing that it's a moving target. Now, one of the reasons I was late, I wasn't able to get here and probably not able to deliver the message that I wanted to deliver to you as much as I wanted, is because I was on a deep sea sub expedition to the geology seamounts and Lauihi, which is the first hotspot seamount, the youngest seamount, volcanic seamount in Hawaii. And it was pretty spectacular. And while I was down there, there was some things that I just wanted to share with you, but also some things that people that are also researchers, deep sea researchers, are bringing up deep sea corals called Lophelia. And they've been keeping them in cold aquaria for about a year. And usually, and it's also, I understand people, so Nanaka has been keeping corallium in Okinawa, and and we've been sharing various experiences of what they've had. And what they've noticed that when they've been keeping them in aquaria, when you actually section them, membranes stop to be formed. Things may look like they're living, but are they actually just on the brink of survival? Are they gradually dying? So even though these environmental parameters and these observations might seem a little bit scientific, a little bit windy, a little bit dull, not very exciting, they actually, in the long haul, hopefully is my hope, is to enable you to keep these creatures in aquaria. They're actually growing, thriving, maybe even reproducing, and we can share that with others that will not be able to see these. But maybe we can go and see these things a lot deeper. Maybe we can start bringing things. And subs are absolutely ideal because you can actually do experiments with those, with the manipulators and stuff like that, which is not quite the same with an ROV. So I wanted to share with you just this actually, I wanted to share with you a lot more footage, but this is a big press release that's going out on Thursday. So I had permission to share this bit with you. But this is what you'll see at 1,300 meters down on the reefs. There's a little bit of audio, and it's not that great at the moment. It needs to be HD'd up. But these are new species to science, as well as precious corals, corallium, and you can hear just the videos going on in the background.
Look at that shrimp out there.
There's a shrimp there.
Look at that little guy.
There's Dr. Greg Scone. He's very excited.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the pilots. And upcoming
Yeah,
shortly.
space just came alive for us, you know?
Yeah.
This is beautiful.
And so this is a new species that I discovered on this trip. We've called it purple haze. Please excuse the footage right now. And look at those galatheids. And they just stick their hands up like that. And they're actually just got these little filtration devices.
Oh, that was the
Here, oh, Jesus, Joseph and Mary.
What?
Oh, holy cow.
Oh, fuck a duck, look at that. Whoa.
Oh my God, he's just coming right by the viewport. He's trying to get into the viewport.
That was a surprise.
Where'd he go?
I know, but I couldn't not show you this. It was just too cool.
He's having his way with us. He's mangling the sub.
This thing was huge. And excuse my language, but I think you can understand why.
Say again?
But yeah, we put down these bait stations. Curiously, they don't give a rat's ass about the bait stations.
Yes, I believe John Ye has a paper on it.
So this is a Pacific sleeper shark, and it came to visit us. As you can see there, I know you can see it.
We got that tail.
If they ever seen me, you got the eye. You probably saw right into his brain.
I was
Unfucking believable.
where it was like exposure-wise. I mean, it was just. he's got two perfect
Sorry?
nicks in his tail.
It's a Pacific super shark. And yeah, we saw actually on adjacent reefs. Thank you for indulging me there. I know it's not anything to do with corals, but but yeah, that was actually on Lauihi, which was basically. Let me see. Oh yeah, that was on Lauihi, where we were actually doing. That was right in the pit, and it used to be highly active. No one had been there for 6 years, and we were able to Conservation International and some high-end donors basically funded this trip. And I got this phone call. They said, "Would I come?" I was like, "Hell yeah!" And yeah. So, but those big sharks, the same species, on adjacent seamounts which have not been dived before ever. So we were able to sort of like full in-your-face exploration with loads and loads of juveniles, all populating these all these seamounts. But the other thing I have not been able to show you, but I can tell you, is that these seamounts and many seamounts around the world at these temperatures with all these beautiful corals, new species to science, all the way up into the twilight zone, have high impact of fisheries. And you get ghost fishing, which is the nets that often get cut or caught and snagged and stay on these seamounts, stay on these reefs, and continue to kill animals. I can't show you some of the footage, as I say, at the moment, but one of the things that it occurred to me on my way back over here was that if I could share that with you, and if we can continue to work on trying to optimize how to keep these things in aquaria, then we can further bring these things to the community and to help them appreciate what really, really is down there. Because I think it's like 65% of 70% of our world is under the ocean. The other thing is I wanted to share with you, I've got a little bit more, is that when I was an undergrad, I was at Plymouth University in the UK, and one of the projects myself and my friend Simon had to do was to go into the National Marine Aquarium and do a bit of an expose, right? He was a bit more for aquaria, and I was a little bit, hippie out there, conservation, screw zoos, screw aquarias, no, we want to keep them in the ocean. And by the end of that exercise, my mind had changed completely. I used to go down to that aquaria and I used to just sit in front of the tanks and I used to watch the children and I used to watch the people and I used to feel how it helped me. And it helped me see that what you do is really, really helpful to so many people. So this is another species. This is actually a new species that I picked up at 90 meters in Polyp and that we're working on in aquaria. And this is some of the feeding stuff that we're doing. And all I do is I've just got a big macro lens on my diving camera and I stick it in the tank with a big light, which is probably not so great with the light, but it's the only way I can do it. And I'm filming them doing what their behavior on their different feeds. So I'm going to actually do something that I would never, ever usually do. And that is actually go a little bit ad hoc now. And I want to show you some of the live footage. But because I've got literally hours and hours and hours and hours of footage, I apologize. I did not have time to summarize it all for you today. So I'm just going to actually go offline a little bit, how we're doing for time. We've got a little bit of time. And I can see if I can actually pull up a couple of these bits of footage in situ and then in aquaria and try and summarize a little bit of what I'm seeing. But then after that, I can take questions. Some of this footage is already on YouTube online, and more footage will be online over the recent stuff. So please excuse me. Thank you very much for your patience. And so this is just the Carriajoa that I was telling you about, and this is what it looks like in situ. Let's just lighten this up a little bit. Very, very nice, all the rest of it. And this is where I collected this off Oahu. Excuse me, it's very, very high flow down there. You can see the polyps just really going for it. And this, again, this is in situ, and as macro as I can get. And you can see them sort of just there in the water column, in the flow. And basically, Dr. Richard Parr's there, he helped me a great deal. We went down on these wrecks and so on with food dye. We tried everything. We could not bring up a decent signature. These things just bypassed it all and just left their polyps open. And they just seem to respond a lot more to these tiny, tiny particulates in the water column. Now I can move it along a little bit here. Let's see where we go here. So this is just tons and tons of this sort of stuff where I'm watching this behavior. You can see them all when a little bit more particulates come along. You see these tiny, tiny bits here. They start to get a bit excited. I'm not adding anything to this here. I'm just allowing nature to do its thing. Now, I don't know if other people are already doing this, so if this is not news to you, sorry, but it's really exciting to me. And I feel that I can learn a great deal on how these things can eat and hopefully pass it on to you guys or anyone else that doesn't know about it. So yeah, here's just more and more of that kind of stuff, and you can see how they behave and see how the flow, this was very important to me. I could actually then look at the different flow structures that we're using in the aquarium and marry that up in terms of the environment and see how the polyps are behaving. And when you go on night dives, you really see quite a lot of flow. You can see them, they're like, do that kind of stuff. And so with those kind of pulsing flow machines that you have, excuse me, I haven't got the right terminology, they emulate that kind of thing on the polyps. And I find this very, very interesting and how we can move forward with that. So this is what they're doing in the field. And you can see the little creatures there. That's the other thing. When you bring these up into the environment, their associates are really important. If their associates are doing too well, you know you're doing something not right. You've got too many nutrients in there and they're having a good time, and you can guarantee the polyps are not going to start doing very well. That was my experience. I feel like I'm kind of coming in here telling a whole bunch of people what to do who already know way more than I do. So that's what they're doing here. Let's just bring it forward a little bit. Yeah, and this is, I think they're so cute. Look at that, they've got little hands and things. I know there's their tentacles, but they're just super, super cute. They're just catching everything, at least trying. Yeah, and putting things in their mouths. Now, the other things that I have noticed, that if the particles are a little bit big, they will actually, after a while, the tentacles will come up, and then they will eventually start to bring that material out of their polyps again. And as soon as I've got all that data together, I will put it online, and those people who are interested, it'll all be freely available, and you can see those observations. The other film that I wanted to show you is basically what we did with this particular, I mean, look at that flow, it's going completely bizarre. This was on the night dive. This was actually, I filmed this freehand. It was really difficult, but the flow was really, really strong. Yeah, so you can see how that's working there. So I'm going to briefly show you what happened in Aquaria, and then I will take some questions after that. So let's see what we have here. So this is where we're bombarding with a lot of feed. A lot of feed and a very high flow there. As you can see, it's quite different to the natural environment. And we did play around with different flows. The polyps there, they're filling their boots a bit with the different arthropods that they're being fed. They catch them, but quite often they don't. They catch them more as an artifact of the actual of the artemia and the mysids and the copepods than actually, because I've noticed that the actual the artemia and what have you, they'll also stick to other parts of the colony, not just the actual polyp itself. And very often I'll see the behavior where they just go flying out all the time, and you can see that a little bit here. So this is just some of what it's like at the beginning, and I'll fast forward a little bit because it does go on. You can see again, hold on a minute. Here we go. You can see there it's sticking, but eventually that one just flies off It just flies off. These things, that's very, very common. It's gone. And that suggests to me that, it's not necessary. They're not the most efficient feeders when it comes to big things. And as I said before, their pharynx is actually quite small for something that's supposed to be actually eating zooplankton of a considerable size. So I think in their evolutionary history, they certainly did. But as time has progressed, especially in the deep ocean where you're not going to get big, creatures to feed on like that, they're going to be relying a lot on marine snow. They're going to evolve their structures in order to eat that kind of food. And my preliminary isotopic data is actually showing that. So you can see things are getting stuck, but as I said before, when you really watch over time, you actually find that it's actually the animals that they're trying to eat or whatever that are the sticky bits, not actually the polyps themselves. So this is what was happening. This is how things were happening after a couple of weeks. And you can see after a while, they're not doing so well. And then towards the very, very end, let me see. This is what their polyps were like kind of most of the time. It was very hard to feed them, and the flow was way too high. They would just kind of shut down. They shut down a great deal. And then you can see things are just being released all the time. That flow is just really too high. In a few more seconds, and then we'll just see what they're like at the very, very end. And you get these growth anomalies as well. These weird growth anomalies that start coming up. And that's how it ended. Very sad. I'm doing some comparative stuff. We've got some stuff over at UH at the moment. I've got a really good intern. His name's Miles. And he's also showing... he actually made up a refugium, which he learned online. I just let him loose, and it's working out really well. So I'm comparing the systems with the refugium system in the UH with the Waikiki aquarium system, which I showed you earlier. And I'll keep you guys posted if you're interested. So thank you very much for your patience.